So it didn't happen to you. Like, this is not just against you. This is the part of that we must understand. So you got somebody who can really help you move forward rather than just helping you replay the old events and letting you know it's so horrible you had to live through it. Gratitude gives you hope, and hope gives you action. Without gratitude, it's hard to move at all. And some people are like, well, there's just so many things that have happened to me. And I would say change the word to for. Quit saying to me, change it to for me. You can tell people, like, I'm struggling with X. You don't have to go through everything about that. You know, it's not what happens to you, it's what you do with what happens that counts. So what are you going to do with that moving forward?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Broken Beautiful Me, stories of hope, gratitude, and resilience. And I am so happy to have as a guest today, Sherry Winn. Sherry stepped into the world as a leader, first in sports, where she attained the highest level possible in athletics, the Olympic Games. She then led college basketball programs for 23 years, winning a national championship and taking her team to 3 Elite Eights. Since 2012, as CEO of the Winning Leadership Company, she's delivered over 3,700 hours of leadership programs where she has developed Olympic-level leaders. Sherry has spoken to audiences as large as 14,000 and has spoken for companies such as Dell, McDonald's, and Adobe. She has spoken in Gillette Stadium, airplane hangars, baseball diamonds, and too many hotel convention centers to mention. I love that. Organizations such as the Volunteers of America, Anytime Fitness, Edward Jones, and a host of multi-million and billion-dollar companies invest in Sherry's teachings each year. Welcome, Sherry, to the show. I'm so happy to have you.
Well, I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled to be discussing resilience and gratitude today, really hoping that people who are listening will take the words that you and I speak today, take them to heart, and use them so that they're able to feel so much happier inside themselves.
Thank you. I hope that as well. So to start, can you share a little bit about your journey and how you arrived to the place where you are today as a teacher and a mentor for people in leadership?
Well, Kelly, as you and I were talking before we started this, we talked about adversity being present in everybody's life. The same is true with mine. We often don't share all those steps of adversity. What we share is our accomplishments. So we don't share our failures and the pain, the heartbreak, which, we probably should share more of that just to let people know that this is the pathway of being human. This is the way that it works. So some of the things that were remarkable, some of the things that were the most difficult for me growing up was the fact that my parents, when I was young, they were very good. They were good parents. They were very good at discipline. They were good teachers. And then that fell apart when I was in high school, and it became a very challenging scenario where I didn't know who they were anymore. Example would be they were going through a divorce. They started hating each other. And one evening, my mom broke in my dad's home, and I was there, and she tore up we had like a hall of mirrors and pictures, and she tore that up. She was breaking that up with some sort of something she picked up by the door, screaming at my dad, saying, just go ahead, kill me now. Why don't you just go shoot me now? Here, I'll get the gun for you. And he was saying nothing. And I was like, she's running to the back room where our guns were kept. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I ran in there and, got in front of the guns, and my dad's still standing there, and he was clearly in shock. And she's, cursing at him, yelling at him. And she goes, well, I'll just kill myself for you. And she runs into the kitchen where the knives are. I run into the kitchen. And so I'm, shielding her from these weapons. She starts throwing the dishes and throwing plates out of out of their cabinet. And she's not throwing them at me, but she's throwing them and breaking things. I don't know how long this thing lasts, but I could remember thinking, am I going to witness a murder? Like, am I going to witness something happening in our house today? And and I never told anybody about that for years. for decades. I never shared that story because I was so embarrassed and ashamed of it. When she left, I went and got my stuff and I left. I left the house too. I was like, if she comes back, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be a part of whatever's going to happen. I just don't want to be a part of it.
Yeah.
But I mean, things like that they became more normal. Like that became normalized in our our living situation. And they're both professional people, right? And so you would think that they're professionals. My dad had a PhD, my mom had a master's, and you would think, well, geez, they're smart. So they ought to be good people, but that doesn't include emotional intelligence. It certainly doesn't include crisis. When people go
Right.
into crisis, these pieces of them come out, which you would never dream were inside that individual. So that was a big thing that put me in a tailspin,
Yeah.
because I felt like nobody was around. I was abandoned. I was betrayed. Everything I'd grown up believing in was shattered. I just didn't know who to believe anymore. And so when I was going to college at that time, I wasn't doing well in school. I was a straight A student before going to college. Now I'm struggling in college. I started drinking. Basketball wasn't going well, and it was just like this incredible tailspin where I went into depression. And then as things kind of built up from there, things just kept happening, and I was totally had zero skills to navigate this, which made it worse. Because if you have zero skills to navigate it, all you do is numb yourself. And when you numb yourself, you have developed dysfunctional habits, which then can develop into addictions. And I was lucky enough that I was never addicted to alcohol, but I certainly abused it for many years.
Yeah. My gosh. And you're so right. There's so many of us who we can be so accomplished in our lives in so many different respects, but still not have the tools in the tool chest to deal with trauma. I remember situations in my own life where I was like, I got nothing. I mean, I got nothing here to get me out of this. And to a point, I think that brings you to a place of surrender where you can open to grow. But it's certainly it's scary as hell, and we've all been there at one point or another. So tell me where you transitioned, because I just read your bio. So you're coming from this background. So how did you make that transition into something and channel something to the point that you then go on and become an Olympian? How did that happen?
I don't think I did a very good job. I think I was really compartmentalizing, this part of my life and this part of my life. And because I was in athletics, there was a outlet. I could go train, I could go exercise, and so we know that's a good thing to do. It still wasn't resolving any of the things that I was shoving down, right? So I was able to kind of leave that separate life. Like we're talking about my parents leaving that life, I was able to do that for
Yeah.
many years. And with the outlet of athletics, I mean, that was physically, you were letting go of some of the anger and some of the things that were inside me, but I wasn't dealing with anything. And when the actual epiphany, the moments of epiphany came when I turned 35 and I developed chronic pain. So I couldn't sit, stand, or walk without pain. And I went to 17 different medical professionals, had every test known to mankind, and they were like, we don't know. I mean, that was what I got. Like, we don't know. And if you've ever been to a specialist, it takes like 3, 4, 5 months to get into a specialist.
Yeah.
And then they run a test and they go, we don't know. And I'm like, well, where should I go? Who should I seek? I don't know. I mean, that was literally what I got. And so after 2 years of doing this, I go, you know what? This isn't working. And so I left that, like I just said, Western medicine. I'm out of Western medicine. I'm going to go to some alternative medicine and I'm going to seek something. I just kept seeking. And that was the great part about being an athlete, is that never say die attitude, the understanding the more the more you train, the more you find an answer, like that kind of thing, led me to finding these specialists who said the mind, body, and spirit are all important in healing. And I thought, well, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. But I was so much in pain that I said I'd try it. And the first thing they did was start talking about emotions. And Kelly, I was like, I'm not talking about emotions. Like, are you crazy? Like emotions? Like, I haven't dealt with those for, 2 decades. I'm gonna start dealing with it now. And so through this process, uh, it was just, I would go back because I would get relief from them. And so I kept going back to get relief. But I wasn't still dealing with the central issues of all the, like the spiritual pieces of me that I just discarded. Because this is what happens to people, right, Kelly? They go, well, God wouldn't, God abandoned me. God's not around. I mean, we do that. It's part of that. And then, of course, I hated myself because somehow I had failed myself. So that was in there as well. And all these things were just things that they would say, do you want to talk about age 13? I'm like, nope. Do you want to
Yeah.
talk about it? Nope. Like I would not, it took years. I'm not kidding you when I say years of understanding that emotions were important in healing the physical body, that the body is tied to physical and spiritual, like all of it's important. And that's really where I started learning these really deep, I don't even know if they're deep philosophies, but belief systems that help people, that help me get better and recover and become happier. That's where and I was years into this like therapy because I would get better, I'd go home and nothing had changed like inside me.
Yeah.
So then I'd need to go back, and you can imagine how expensive this was. It was. And there was a moment where the therapist said, and I'm sure, like how many times we have to hear something before we hear it. I'm sure this occurred. And she said to me, what do you think will happen if you let these emotions out? I paused and I said, I'll die.
Really?
That's what I thought would happen. That if I ever let those things come out, I would not be able to deal with them and I would die.
Wow.
Yeah. And so she said to me, do you know you're not the same person you were like 20 years ago? And I was like, no, I didn't know. Like, I really didn't know that. I still thought I was like that 17-year-old trying to deal with this stuff. And I never realized that I had along the way changed and had found new ways of thinking that would now allow me to deal with some of the things I'd never dealt with.
Wow. Um, that is fascinating to me. That initial reaction that you had was that feeling. And I think that I'm just, it's just got my mind kind of racing here. I'm thinking about things that I have held on to for years, very painful things for my, and you're right. You do feel like there's something drastic will happen if you let those things go because you've become so accustomed to holding them so tightly to yourself, right? Um, and then when you learn, so you're talking about the lessons that you learn. So mind, body, spirit. So let's explore some of them. What were some of the lessons that you learned in terms of that relationship with your spirit and your mind and your health?
Well, first of all, I had to change my belief system about God because growing up in the South and in the United States was like, that we were kind of like on the string, we were puppets from God, and God was messing with everything we we're doing, right? And so I had to understand that God really wants, you could call it universe, source energy, whatever you call, but that we have free will. We get the decision to make whatever decisions we want to make, which results in consequences. And God's not in our day every day going, oh, I'm going to mess with her. Like, that's really what I thought. Like, oh, he's just going to, mess with me and make it worse. And because of something I said, 20 years ago or whatever it was, I thought. But I had to reconstruct that, which is now I think that if my ultimate belief system is in a higher power, that higher power is love. It's all about love, right?
Yeah.
So now I don't feel like abandoned or betrayed. I know that I have free will, and what choices I make creates the consequences I live. And it's
Mhm.
always free will, right? So part of that is that. And I also know that when I look at a higher power, it's love. It's about love. It's all about love. And everything that occurs is for my own highest good. So that's a belief system, my highest good. So when I'm looking at it from a physical perspective, I don't see that. But if I look at it from a spiritual perspective, my own highest good, the way that I'm growing, the things I'm learning, the deeper kindness and compassion and love that I've acquired, it makes sense because I believe that we're spiritual beings having a human experience. And this is an earth school for us. Well, see, all of that changed from that, original belief system I had from being raised in the deep South in the Bible Belt, which often feels like you're abandoned or betrayed by this God who's trying to harm you in some ways because you're
Mm.
just not good enough.
Yeah, I think, there's a lot to be said about organized religion and the beauty of it and the people that they help, but that
Mm-hmm.
there is certain belief systems that, and I was raised in a Roman Catholic household, and there is a certain belief system about good and evil and your actions, and so then I think that you hold on to guilt that maybe you shouldn't have to carry. And then you don't recognize God's love is all around you. So, how did you get to a point where you get up in the morning and you don't have to be constantly remind yourself that this everything is leading for the greater good and everything is love? Did you what did you do? Did you have habits that you did every day to kind of get your headspace there?
Mm-hmm. Well, this is a lot of what I talk to my coaching clients about is that we have to change our thought habits, right? So our thought habits are really your belief systems because a belief is just a thought that you kept thinking and now it's a belief. So you have to change those. And the only way to change those is really you can't eliminate a habit. You can only change it, right? You can only substitute something new for it. So what that means is you have to learn and rewire your brain so that it now thinks a different way. The only way I've learned to do that is through repetition. So that means repetition of reading things that align with a new way of thinking. It means meditation. It means, gratitude statements. So in the morning when I get up, I have about a 45-minute routine I go through, which includes writing intentions. And intention is different than a goal. Intention is something like, today I want to let the spirit guide me, or today I want to be kind to everybody I meet, or today let me offer some profound insight for somebody. That's an intention. Then I write down 5 gratitude statements, things I'm grateful for, and they can't be repeat. So they have to be something new that I'm looking for daily. Then I write down something I love about my body. So it's been very challenging for me over the course of time to have the body experience I've had after being an athlete and having an athletic body to now having an autoimmune disease. And, my body doesn't work the way that I want it to work. It doesn't look the way I want it to look. And I know it is important for me to love my body. So I write down something I love about my body every day. Then I write down a miracle either that occurred to me or I heard about from somebody. So I always write down a miracle because if we don't believe in miracles, then we don't believe they can happen to us. And so you have to convince yourself that there are such things as miracles, which
Yeah.
I think there are after listening to so many people, working with so many people, looking back at my own life, thinking, oh my gosh, how lucky am I at the crazy, insane things that I did, that I woke up and still was alive. That's pretty amazing. Those are miracles. So I done a miracle, then I meditate. And after that, I either read something that I write down, I'm taking notes, or I listen to something, I'm taking notes so that I have filled myself up with good and positive to start my day. And that keeps me, by the way, Kelly, rewiring those really positive things, even now when I think that there's so much negativity that we could delve into, that we could jump into, we could believe, right? There's so much negativity. We could do that to ourselves. And I'm like, I've got to do this every single day so that I show up as the person that I am.
That's beautiful. I think a repetition, if for me, was what was necessary for me because I really had to convince myself about my mindset. I had the internal conversation. Once you realize the internal conversation that you're having with yourself, you're like, God, girl, cut yourself some slack.
Yeah.
You're being so hard on yourself. But
Yeah.
I don't think we pay attention to that. But once you start paying attention, that's the moment, that's the pivot point right there where you can say, okay, I'm going to start saying something different.
Right.
And I used to put little post-it notes on my mirror, just to kind of remind myself to give myself a little bit of grace when I needed it, and I didn't. So I think that morning routine, you're right, it's so key. Um, so how did this kind of shift your and shape your perspective on grief and growth? So a lot of the people who tune into this podcast are struggling with some sort of loss. Sometimes
Mhm.
it is the death of a loved one. It could be a divorce, the breakup of a marriage. It could be that you are a child of divorce, like
Mhm.
we discussed earlier. Um, how did your experiences? How do you then take that and help people who are going through situations like that?
Well, the first thing and is to tell people this is normal and natural. Like what you're experiencing, and what I mean by that is, I read a book by Bruce Freely, and in the book he had researched, um, the challenges we have, and he said an average person has 48 life disruptions in a lifetime. So a life disruptions is something that lasts for 3 months or longer.
Hmm.
So you might break a leg and can't drive, you can't go anywhere. That's a life disruption, right? You might have a child that's being bullied at school, life disruption. 48 of those in a lifetime. That's normal and average. And beyond that, it's 3 to 5 life quakes. So a life quake is the lifelong dream that blows up in your face, the loved one that betrays you in such a way that seems unforgivable, or the injury or illness that alters your life forever. Those are that is the average for every single human being. So to understand this is not done to you, right? This is part of being a human.
Yep.
We don't understand that it is the pathway. This is the pathway of being a human being. And I think just grasping that first is really important for everybody to understand. So it didn't happen to you. Like this is not just against you. This is the part of that we must understand. That's the first part. And then again, it kind of goes back to the power of everything that happens to us. It's not what matter. It doesn't matter what happens to you. What matters is what you do with what happens. That's the important thing. So what are you going to do with that grief? How are you going to turn that around so that somehow it becomes, a life force within you?
Right.
How are you going to use that? And in what ways can you use what's happened to you for the betterment of humankind? And it doesn't mean that you have to be a speaker or an author or a podcast host. It just means that you might meet that person that needs to hear what you know, how you've gotten through something, or just be in the presence of them, just to hold space for them. This is an opportunity. We can't feel that because it feels so heavy and dark at the moment. And it's like that old formula: E plus R equals O, the event plus your response to the event equals your outcome.
Yes.
So how are you going to respond to it so that eventually, and I'm not saying don't feel grief or don't feel angry or anything. I'm not saying that. But eventually, are you going to hold that for the next 20 years, 30 years, 40 years? How are you going to let that impact you? Or are you going to be able to move beyond it so that you can use it for the greater good of yourself and mankind?
That's such a great point. Do you feel so? What do you think the relationship is then with community? And when I say community, it could be an online group that people participate in. It could be a small group of work colleagues, where at your workplace. Could be a small group of friends. Could be someone from church. But what is the relationship? Because I think when kind of the crap hits the fan and stuff really starts happening, it feels so isolating.
Sure.
So, what do you think about the relationship between finding that place of turning that event around and in how you respond and turning it into something where you can help others for the greater good? What's the relationship between community and getting to that point?
Well, I think community is important. I mean, I think if you had supportive, let me underline and underscore supportive community, I think that's really important. So if you have friends who are dysfunctional, families dysfunctional, and I don't mean that in a negative way, I mean that they just don't know what they don't know yet. So they're not going to be helpful to you because they're probably going to keep that event bigger or more on fire than it should be.
Yeah.
So they're going to say, oh, you should feel that way, or that's horrible, or those kind of things. So if you have those kind of friends or family, you need to seek out a coach, seek out a mentor, seek out a therapist, seek out somebody who can really help you move forward rather than just helping you replay the old events and letting you know it's so horrible you had to live through it. And I'm not saying that in terms of, yes, I when somebody else hurts, I hurt. Keeping them in that hurt is not what is going to help them move forward. So really finding those people where you can be open and honest and they're just going to hold the space for you. They're going
Mhm.
to know if they need to say something or not say anything at all, or help you reflect a little bit. And that if that's not your current group of people, then please, please, please go seek people who have studied this, who understand this, who can help you move forward in a way that's going to be best for you.
Hey guys, Kelly here. I wanted to jump in and let you know that you can find out more about my work by visiting my website at kellybuckley.com, or you can find my books on Amazon. Okay, back to the episode. In your darkest moments, what gave you hope? And, how do you inspire others that, you're speaking to a large group? How do you inspire others to find hope in their own lives?
Well, there's again, that goes back to those belief systems. So you have to find some belief systems that help you. We start though, Kelly, with gratitude. I mean, I really think when you can stop looking at the negative, because there's always going to be negative, and start being thankful for even the smallest amount of whatever it is. So if you can find something that you can look at and go, oh my gosh, like, is that every morning I go outside? I live in a place that's got mountains and a creek, and it's just the most gorgeous place I can imagine. I just go, I'm so blessed. That's how I start my day. Can you imagine living here? Like, I'm so blessed to live here. And it starts with that. It starts with that gratitude of feeling something, of really taking in and not just saying it, but feeling it like to your deepest core of being, feeling that gratitude, because gratitude gives you hope and hope gives you action. Without gratitude, it's hard to move at all. And some people are like, well, there's just so many things that have happened to me. And I would say change the word to for. Quit saying to me, change it to for me.
Love that.
Then start looking for the ways it's going to help you. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and there was a woman that was saying, I've had this chronic pain for 15 years. I'm done with it. I'm so mad about it. Da da da. And the podcaster said, "In what ways has it helped you?"
Mm.
And she couldn't turn it around. And I thought, here we go. Like, I'm naming my stuff. I'm like, I'm more kind. I'm more human. Compassionate. I've been able to write about it. I've been able to speak about it. I've been able to help people. I bring more light and energy to the world. All this because of that.
Yeah.
Without that, I probably wouldn't be as humble. I'd probably be more egotistical. I wouldn't be as understanding. I mean, there's all these other things. And so I started listing all the things. I was like, my goodness, this has really been very powerful in helping me become a better human being.
And you can't really see that view of it when you're in the thick of it. But yeah, I very much like you. I look at all the ways that I have changed as a human being, and humility is is a great one. Um, the perspective that I have, not feeling the need to step into some of the conflicts that you see around you, whether that be within your family, your community, your country, like just not willing to step into the mud, and say, well, if I'm going to focus on the good of all others or helping others, I can't do that when my feet are stuck in that mud. So I have to make a choice to stay in this mindset. And and I mean, when you talk about your morning ritual, um, I've been reading a lot about positive psychology, and it talks about actually changing your neural pathways in your brain, just and in less than a month, that your neural pathways start to change when you start telling your brain a different story.
Mhm.
And so you can start day one, and you can actually see a difference within a month in how you're feeling about your life. So a beautiful thing about the routines. So you speak now to large groups. You help people in terms of leadership. You speak to companies, and so I'm assuming you speak to both the leaders in companies as well as the employees and their colleagues. Um, how do you address leaders who are trying to do their best to help people who are struggling?
Well, I can always go in and do, retreats and workshops and trainings and all that kind of thing. But really, for somebody to make radical change, they've got to do something radically different. And that's why I love coaching people one on one, because that's when you get the opportunity to really hear what's going on and what they feel. And like you said, they're thought habits. So it's our thought habits that produce the way that we move, the way that we react, the way that we think. And you talked about the neural networks. Well, we get these neural networks. We get a computer programming from our early ages that we don't even know that we have. So whatever your parents or grandparents or step parents are saying at those early ages, that's what you get. And you don't even know that that thinking is going on. You don't know how it's impacting you. So I really love to have those deep conversations with people to help them unwind some of that and see how those belief systems are currently impacting what they're doing today. That's one of my favorite ways to do it. Now, there's other ways to do it. Like I said, I mean, having the leadership retreats and doing workshops or doing sessions throughout, 6 months or a month with the team. What I found, and that's impactful,
Mm-hmm.
very impactful, because the more that people know, the more that they can start changing, because they can't do, if they don't know better, they can't do better, right? They have to know better to do better. And
Exactly.
understanding that is part of the learning. And yet I think that the deeper dive is always something that wakes people up to a level that they weren't aware of before. I mean, it's that, like you said, the mindfulness of understanding the thoughts you're thinking, how those thoughts impact your actions. And most people just don't know. So I'll give you an example. When I was a kid, my mother sang this worm song to me. I don't know the right title. I'll cut the worm song, but the words are: nobody likes you. Everybody hates you. You need to eat some worms. First you get the bucket, then you get the shovel. Ooh, how they wiggle and squirm, right? Now
Yeah.
listen to that. Nobody likes you. Everybody hates you. So as a kid, I didn't filter that out as a nursery rhyme. That was like a truth that got into my neural network that I believed. And then because I believed that, Kelly, I acted on that. So if you can imagine a young kid going to play sports and then seeing a group of people talking and immediately thinking they're talking about me, they don't like me. First thought, they don't like me. They're talking about me. They don't like me. And then how would I react? Well, I would separate myself more from them. So imagine now you're one of the best players on the team, if not the best, and you're separating yourself. What this group of people thought was, oh, like she thinks she's too good for us. When in reality,
Yeah.
that's nowhere near what I was thinking. And so it caused chaos and separation and pain. And that happened in elementary school, junior high school, college, the Olympic team, until like we talked about reading earlier about how important reading was to rewire your brain. I started reading stuff and I started recognizing, oh my gosh, I'm doing this to myself. Like I'm from something, a nursery rhyme impacted me for decades until I just recognized that's what it was. And I just called out the belief in that. And I'm like, that's not true. It was never true. It was never true. And yet it led me into all this pain for decades. And I'm like, that's not true. I never walk into a room anymore and go, people don't like me. I mean, I almost literally ever, never do. Because I'm like, even if I go, oh, that's just a nursery rhyme. And then I act as if people like me. And because I act like they like me, they do. It's amazing.
That is amazing. I know exactly the nursery rhyme you're talking about. I remember it very well. And I never really put two and two together about how that was really a negative affirmation for all these kids of our generation. I hope that no one's singing it now. Oh my gosh.
Please don't.
And it's so funny when you come to that realization. I remember it must have been 15 years ago at least. I read The Success Principles by Jack Canfield. And one of the first success principles he talks about is take 100% accountability for your life. and then you have no one to blame. You have no one to be passive aggressive towards because you're responsible for where you are and the choices that you make going forward. And I remember reading it and I went, well, crap. Like that's I needed to I've been waiting to hear that my whole life. And it's just
Absolutely.
it was one small little sentence that completely to this day changed my outlook on my life. I don't look to other people now if stuff's not going right in my life, right? I look and I say, okay, well, if I take 100% accountability, where am I going to go from here? It's so interesting how things can just completely cause you to pivot. So
Absolutely.
with um, with people who are going to the workplace and they are struggling and they're walking in, and we talked a little bit about this before we pressed record. I remember one of my bosses years ago, and I worked in healthcare, saying, well, you just need to leave that at the door. Which, how in the hell can you leave stuff at the door when your life is falling apart? I mean, you can't. So, what would you say to those people who are going through the stuff right now and they're showing up to work every day and they're trying to do the best that they can with what they have? What advice can you give to them about, you know, support that they can look for around, telling their boss what's going on? Like, how can we support those people?
Well, I think the first of all is understanding what you just said, Kelly, which is we can't separate ourselves in such a manner. You know, if you're going through some trauma, you can't just drop it off and leave it and then pick it back up later. I mean, of course, we can, kind of numb ourselves by not thinking about it a little bit, but what you resist persists, right?
Yeah.
So you don't want to keep resisting and pushing against something because it just is going to stay there. You have to do something with it. So I would say, if you have the money, hire a coach, go to therapy,
Yep.
right? If you don't have that kind of money, I would say get some good books, start reading books, keep a journal, right? Start writing things down in a journal, how you feel, why you feel that way. Do some meditation, do prayer, do whatever you can, like start doing habits. I talked about some of the habits I do every day. Do some of that. I mean, you can't just lock it away because there's things about emotions, right? They don't go in through your head and out through your feet. When you stuff an emotion, and I know this very deeply, when you stuff an emotion, it's in you. Like it stays in you. And then it creates dis-ease that at some point in time you're going to have to deal with. And when people say, well, that's just silly, and I go, what's stress? What's stress? Is that an emotion? And they'll go, yeah. I go, so what's the leading cause of cancer? Stress. What's the leading cause of heart problems? Stress. Oh, okay. There we go. So
Right.
we're talking about. That's exactly what we're talking about is you've got to do something with those emotions. You can't just keep stuffing them because they will create something in your life that you don't want to deal with.
And scientists are really discovering now that where we hold trauma. And I've talked about before on the podcast. My husband and I have recently started breath work,
Mm-hmm.
and one of them was to kind of heal the inner child.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing one in a couple of weeks, which is about kind of our ancestral thoughts and beliefs and working through, because I can think of some things that my mother's belief system and how that impacted me as a woman,
Sure.
and my feelings of self-worth. But so science is really catching up to what a lot of people who have practiced meditation and yoga and breath work for some years now know, is that we hold on to those things and how we can let them go. So back to the workplace for a second with someone who is grieving, because I know that I talk to a lot of people who really struggle with going back to work, and we just covered the part about not being able to leave it at the door. But there's also kind of, the workplace is not where you get therapy. The workplace is where you go to work.
Right.
So what is the balance for somebody who they go in, they know they're not operating at their best because they're just trying to get through the day right now. So, how do they reach out for a helping hand
Mm-hmm.
while still maintaining professionalism in their job?
I think that the key there is you can tell people like I'm struggling with X. You don't have to go through everything about that. You don't have to tell them, to because there are still people that every chance they get, they're going to tell you, what's happened. Again, my mother's one of them. Trust me, my mother's one of them. She'll tell me my parents have been divorced for over 50 years, and she'll say, "Well, let me tell you what your father did to me." I'm like, "Oh, mom, come on, like that was 50 years ago. Why is that still? Why are we still talking about this?" But there are those people who are going to bring up every single detail. They want you to know. They want you to, and that just turns people off. That is not, they're not going to turn to help you. It's too much. But if you were just to walk in and say, "Listen, I'm really struggling today. I want you to know that I'm having a hard day due to X." And you don't have to give a big like description of whatever X is. You can just say, "Due to my relationship or due to my health." You don't have to, if you want to name it a little bit more, fine. Just so people know that you're struggling. You don't have to give them the whole story. You don't have to come in every day and say it again and again and again. But you could say, like, the next day, "I'm working on this. I'm really working on what you like. No, I am aware of how I'm showing up and I'm working on it." But you got to do something with it. You can't just go tell people and then
Yeah.
that's it. You've got to go do something with it. Got to come back to what, whatever you resist persists. So if you're not dealing with it, it's coming back to you again, 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 again. So you have to do something with it. And so don't expect those people at work to fix you. In fact, don't expect anybody to fix you. As you said,
Mm-hmm.
success principle number one, take full responsibility of where you are. It doesn't mean that you say, for example, you were in a car accident and you were on the right side of the road, you're going the right speed, and somebody hits you they're on the wrong side of the road. They hit you, not your fault, right? None of it's your fault. And what are you going to do from that point on is your responsibility. That moment of impact may not have been your responsibility, but moving forward, everything else is. So what are you going to do with that? It's not what happens to you, it's what you do with what happens that counts. So what are you going to do with that moving forward? That's the big point. So you have to take responsibility for how you're feeling, which means maybe you need to do different things to create a different feeling.
Mm-hmm.
That is your responsibility. It's not to expect everybody else in the world to wait for you for a year for you to figure it out. That's now you're dumping on them. Right.
That's so true. Yeah. So it's okay to kind of let people know that the struggle that you're going through, but you need to have a plan behind that, a plan.
Mhm.
And whatever that plan is for you is individual.
Absolutely.
Whether that be therapy or books or, nature or, a
Mhm.
lot of people find a lot of healing in nature. And that's how they work through their emotions. Nature kind of mirrors a lot of the human experience, with in terms of the changing seasons and growth and death. And
Mhm.
so people can find a lot of lessons there as well. Um, if you could leave our listeners with one message about resilience, hope, and gratitude, what would it be?
Love yourself.
Love yourself.
I think so many people don't love themselves. We talked about guilt and shame. And so if you know anything about emotional vibrations, that we're energetic human beings. And so when we live in guilt and shame, it's the two lowest vibrations anybody can ever emit. And loving yourself means forgiving yourself, right? Letting go of the old things that you thought, "I should have done this," or "if I would have done this," or whatever we do to ourselves. All the times we beat up on ourselves. If you could really just love yourself, like where you are right now, where you're standing right now, and working on it every day, because that will shift your energy and that will shift you into a better feeling place. When you feel better, you'll do better. So I would say really pay attention to the words you say to yourself. Really pay attention to how often you are in guilt and shame and shift those through forgiveness, shift those and stand more in self love.
Mm-hmm. Um, it, it- Releasing guilt and shame is such a huge thing for so many. Um, I After a breathwork session, I released something that I had carried with me over 35 years. Shame,
Mm.
shame, quietly.
Hmm.
Never spoke about it ever to
Hmm.
anybody. And
Hmm.
through breath work was able, all of a sudden it all bubbled up. And then I was like, why am I still carrying that heavy load? And then you just put it down and then that's it. And but for whatever reason, it was part of the fabric of my life and I
Sure.
it was kind of unconscious in my mind. And I think a lot of people are not aware of what they're saying to themselves inside.
Oh, oh yeah, no, totally not. I wasn't aware. I wasn't aware. So when you say something over and over again, expect a different result, that's called insanity. And yet we do that to ourselves every day,
Every day.
you know, and then we expect something different. It just can't be different. You have to learn the language of self-love, which is, it should be unconditional. Not I'll love myself when I get this done, or if I lose weight, or like all those things that it's like loving yourself right now, which is what I talked about, how I every day something about my body that I love, because it's so hard for me in that challenge of this is who I was, this is who I love to be. Here's all the things I'm doing to be this way, and it's not happening. And then hating myself for that, for not being there. I have to diligently, well, I have to have due diligence about that so that I keep that self love.
That's so important. And there's so many people with chronic illness who I think will benefit from that wisdom of because you have an expectation of yourself that's very hard to attain on a normal day, and then when you add illness to it, but as you said, there are certain gifts that come with challenges and hardship. Um, I was wishing for clarity about some things with work, and because I had a whole bunch of stuff going on at the same time, and I had an unexpected heart issue. And I was like, okay, answer received, clarity. All of a sudden, I knew exactly what I should be doing, exactly what I didn't need to be doing. Answer received. Thanks so much. Um, but we do have to give our bodies credit for giving us that wisdom. What is one question you wished I asked you, but I didn't? And what would your answer be?
The power of forgiveness. Like really talking about the power of forgiveness. How does that? And
Yeah.
people don't know. They don't know how to forgive. I think that's the biggest challenge. It's like you go, I forgive myself. No, that wasn't it. It's the depth of learning. How do you forgive? Like really understanding it, understanding how it feels, understanding why you deserve self forgiveness, understanding that my higher power, Kelly, forgives me instantly. Instantly. There is no, I don't have to go, do X, X, and X to be forgiven. I believe, just like if you were a parent and you had a child do something, if you love that child, you're forgiving them instantly,
Yeah.
right? They don't have to make it up to you over months. You forgive them instantly. And that allows them, I mean, it doesn't mean you don't have to learn the lesson. Of course, we have to learn the lesson, or the lesson keeps coming. But it's really the power of self forgiveness and how that ties into love and how that ties into health, by the way.
Mm. And what about forgiving other people? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think there's three big places of forgiveness that you have to get around anything, any event. One is against the other people, like you have to forgive the other people. One is yourself, and the third is the higher power. And people go, "Well, I didn't blame God." I go, "Did you say why this happened to me? Who are you talking to?
Mm.
This shouldn't have happened to me. Who are you talking to?" There's a blame going on right there. So it's really those three. If you can do all three of those and see your part in it, and some people go, "Well, I had no part in this." I'm like, right? We always have a part in whatever happens. Maybe it's a small part. We always have a part. Then when you can get all of those, then it's gone. Like it's just gone. You don't have to deal with that again. It's gone.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So, in my global gratitude group, it's called Just One Little Thing. And I look for the little things, little points of gratitude like you do each morning, and I share them with my group. I say one little thing because people who are struggling sometimes they can only find one little thing.
Right.
Looking at the big things is a bit difficult. So today I am thankful. Before we started this podcast, I put my two labs outside. I'm thankful they stayed quiet throughout throughout this. I don't know what they're doing in the backyard. I am sure that the big one, Sam, has probably a hole that is he loves to dig. But I'm thankful they stayed quiet. I am thankful for just your wisdom that you're sharing today. And here in the Carolinas, it's blue skies and it's a gorgeous day. So those are my little things. So what are your little things today?
Well, I'm thankful for the opportunity to be on this podcast and to talk to you and to know that you're out there doing something that's bringing love and light to this world, which is we so badly need. And you're helping people move through some of their grief. That is, the more people that I meet, they're really quality light. They bring light. They bring light. They're light bringers to this earth. The more that I feel so positive about, where I am, the earth school I'm on currently, and the people around me. So thank you for being you and for doing this. It's such a big thing.
Oh, thank you so much. So before we close out, I want people to understand where they can find you. I want you to tell us about your books. I think you've got 4 out currently, and I know that you're working on another one. So if you can tell us about your work and where people can find you and learn more about your message.
So you can find me at www.thewinningleadershipcompany.com. And I'm going to offer you something right now, folks. Anybody who wants to have a free 45-minute conversation with me about any of your challenges, about your thought beliefs, the thought beliefs that are stopping you from moving forward, those kind of thought habits that you have, and you're ready to break free and you're ready to learn more about resilience, happy to give you a free 45-minute conversation around that. You find me at my website. Just say, I listened to you when you were talking to Kelly Buckley. I'm happy to do that for you. In return, you promise that you will rant and rave about me to other people, associations, and organizations. That's all I ask for in return. And some of the books that I've written, my latest book is called Winning Leadership, 7 Secrets to Being a Truly Powerful Leader. And you're saying, well, I'm not a leader, but we all are.
Mm-hmm.
We all are. And so the book is really about that. The power of self-awareness is the first chapter. I think you would love it. Making Success an Adventure is another chapter that goes for every single person that's listening to me today. I have 2 more books coming out that I'm working on right now. Hopefully in April, one of them will come out. And then again, the following April, there will be a book on resilience coming out. So you can find some of my books on my website and at Amazon. Just Google Sherry Winn. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, that is so generous of you to offer that call too. I'm sure that people would love to have 45 minutes with you to talk about their belief systems and how they can move forward. Sherry, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so, so much for coming on the podcast.
Well, thank you. It's been wonderful.
Okay, take care, guys. We'll see you next time. Thank you for joining me today on Broken Beautiful Me. I hope you found today's episode inspiring and insightful. Remember, every scar tells a story, and every story has the power to heal. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform so you never miss an episode. Your support means the world to me, and it helps spread the message of hope and resilience to more people like us. Don't forget to leave a review and share this podcast with your friends and family. Together, we can create a community of strength and beauty in our brokenness. Until next time, stay strong, stay beautiful, and keep shining.